Well, we're going to be starting a series of sermons in which we're going to be taking a look at the book of Daniel. Now, Daniel is a book that you've probably heard of. Maybe you've sat down and read it at some point or parts of it, but usually when we think of Daniel, we think of fantastical, almost hard to believe stories about fiery furnaces and interpreting dreams, visions of the end, as well as the lion's den. So Daniel has some of the most memorable stories in the entire Bible, and some of the most inspiring stories. These stories inspire us to remain true to our faith no matter what may happen. And we're inspired by the stories of Daniel and his friends who have their tests that they go through, and they're even willing to give their lives for their faith and to hold true to their convictions. So we're inspired by Daniel, but Daniel can also have a lot to tell us about how we can live our lives as Christians in America. We live as I said a couple weeks ago, we live in a very different world. A lot has changed in the last 50 to 70 years. We live in what some people call a post-Christian culture, which means that we're done with Christianity. At large, the church does not have as much of a driving force in American culture as it once did. And so sometimes people look at Europe, where about 80% of the people are not involved in church, and they say that we're headed that direction, the same direction as Europe. And so things have definitely changed in many ways. Things have changed in other ways too. We are much more of a multi-ethnic culture. We see a lot of diversity, more maybe than when some of you were growing up. We see much more diversity. It's not that uncommon, even in the Midwest, to go somewhere and to come into contact with people of other faiths, other religions, other cultures. And so we come in contact with people from different parts of the world. Many people are settling in this great nation, and we see some evil people, but we also see good people from other areas. And even if you don't see them face to face, with the advent of the internet and the availability of information everywhere simultaneously, we have access to see the world around us. And so the world has become much smaller in a way. We're much more aware of things, and we can see all of the different kinds of people, whether they are in our community or whether it's around the world. And so the world is just different in many ways. How are we as Christians to live according to our convictions, according to our faith, in the midst of a culture that isn't necessarily, some people would say our culture is anti-Christian. I wouldn't say that. I would say that it's just not necessarily Christian. Well, we can look at the book of Daniel and we can see that there are actually many similarities to Babylon, where Daniel lived. Daniel is a collection of stories written that took place in that time in Babylon, when they were living in Babylon during the exile. Babylon generally is seen as a negative place, because in the Bible, Babylon destroyed Jerusalem, right? They attacked it. They surrounded the city. They waited until people were starving to death because they couldn't get out or in. And so when they are at their weakest, they finally, in desperation, try to escape the city, but they don't succeed. Those that are not killed are taken captive to live in a foreign country of Babylon. It's hard to imagine, right? It's hard to imagine. We know it's possible, but it's hard to imagine somebody doing that, coming in, destroying America, taking those that are killed across to wherever they live to live there. How out of place would you feel, right? And with Jewish people whose faith is dependent upon the land and the temple, all of a sudden, all of those things are gone, and they have nothing. This is when many scholars believe that a lot of the Old Testament took its final shape and form was during that time when they're collecting what they had written and putting it together to preserve their memory and their identity as a people. And so this catastrophic event happens, and so Daniel and his friends are living in Babylon. It's not as bad as it sounds, because they are not enslaved, they are not in prison, they are told to settle down and live their lives. In fact, it's so much comfortable for some people that 70 years later, when people have the opportunity to return to Jerusalem, some people don't want to, because they're quite comfortable living where they are in Babylon. They're just happy where they are. Thank you very much. We don't need to make that long travel back and try to build a city again. No, thank you. So Babylon had this philosophy that it was easier to rule over people if you gave them a little bit of freedom. So the question for Daniel and his friends is, how do you live with your faith and keep your faith intact in a culture that is not necessarily evil or where the people aren't necessarily bad? They're just not Jewish. And so one thing he did, as we read in the scripture, Daniel 1 and 2 tells the whole story. When you read that, you learn that Daniel actually became a counselor to the king. You know, he actually became a counselor to the king of Babylon, which sounds wild when you think of what they did to them. But Daniel and his friends, they went through this rigorous training process for 3 years where they're indoctrinated with Babylonian thought and culture. They learn their history, their language, the astrology, magic. They learn everything there is to know about them. They're even given new names. I mean, that's why I call it indoctrination. They're given Babylonian names to replace their Hebrew names, right? I mean, that sounds like an insult. And yet they accept it, and they get into the service of the king, and they impress the king because he thinks they're pretty good. But that is just wild when you think about it. That they allowed that to happen, and yet they remain true to their convictions. And I think that this can inform us as Christians as we seek about how to live in this new world, I guess you could call it, this new place in which we find ourselves, where it's not necessarily anti-Christian, but it's not necessarily Christian either. And there's a lot of diversity, and diversity is not a bad thing. Diversity is a good thing. I think that ultimately it's one thing that was envisioned with America, is that many people from many different backgrounds could come together. But how do we live in that life? Now that we are seeing that reality, how do we live in that life? And I think that one thing we learn from Daniel is that we don't necessarily need to be combative. You know, sometimes Christians respond by trying to argue our way. And so we'll take a Bible and we'll read in it and we'll say, well, you know, might even sometimes even go to a person who's not even involved in church, and we'll say, well, you need to live this certain way, or you need to stop doing this because that's sinful. That's what the Bible says. Did you know that? The Bible says that's sinful and you need to stop doing that. That works if everybody assumes that God is speaking through the Bible, right? So that works in a Christian culture. But if you live in a place where we live in a place where not everybody assumes that God is speaking through the Bible. So we don't have those shared assumptions. So if you're talking to somebody who's maybe never been in church, or if so, just sparingly, they didn't really grow up in church, and they don't have those same convictions, that argument doesn't work. It just sounds like bullying. Another thing that we sometimes do as Christians is we try to push our way through the government, whether it's trying to force other people to be Christian or to act Christian or to live a Christian way. And the thing is that what oftentimes happens is, and I think that, by the way, we should vote according to our principles, but what oftentimes happens is people see that Christians are just trying to kind of cram the faith down their throats, and it's not always received very well. And what oftentimes happens is that the view of Christians becomes tarnished as oftentimes we become seen as unloving and judgmental and uncaring. And that's not who we are, right? I mean, that's not who we are, but sometimes that's the perception that people see. There are a lot of reasons why young people are not as involved in church. And young people is a relative term. It's 2 or 3 generations now. But, you could say 50 and younger, 40 and younger. You can, wherever you want to put the mark. I'm in there, and yet I don't know all the answers. But, but one of the reasons that some people have said is that the Jesus that they know from what they've heard of Jesus is not the same thing as the Jesus that they see in some of the people in the churches that they've been to and the experience that they've had of people in church. And they've said, well, it doesn't seem like the way that Jesus is supposed to be. And they don't necessarily see that love and compassion and grace always exhibited in the lives of his people. And we can all say amen to that, right? Because we all have times when we don't necessarily put our best foot forward. But we also have to remember we're representatives of Christ. And so we look at the example of Daniel, and we see that he did not separate from the culture and judge it from afar, pointing his finger. he got involved. He got engaged in the culture. He became very close to the king, who was not Jewish. But he became very close to the king, worked for the king, helping, doing everything he could with excellence. And people eventually, they grew to respect Daniel. Some hated him, as we'll see. Some hated him. This is not the easy way out. I mean, it kind of sounds like the easy way out. Oh, we just stop fighting and we just give in. That's not what we're saying. But what Daniel did is he lived according to his convictions. He didn't concern himself necessarily with whether he was going to make other people live according to his convictions, but he lived according to his convictions, lived his life with excellence, getting involved in the community, getting involved in his culture, and other people saw him, and it reflected well upon his God. And then when the conversation comes up, the conversation may come up about the God that he follows. And indeed, the king came to respect not only Daniel, but the God that he follows. It wasn't all smooth sailing, as we'll see in a couple of weeks, actually next week. We'll see that his life was on the line. The life of his friend was on the line, and then later his. So it's not always smooth sailing, and it's not always supposed to be. But what we can do as Christians, as we learn from Daniel, is that in our world, we are not necessarily called to make other people live according to our convictions. That's hard to understand. We want other people to experience the love of Jesus Christ. We can't make them experience the love of Jesus Christ, right? And so we have to start where they are, and we have to connect with them and help them. But we do so while mainly making sure, first of all, we take care of following our own convictions, and then living a life of excellence, whatever we do. So if you're a father, do it with excellence. If you're a teacher, do it with excellence. If you are an administrator, do it with excellence. Whatever it is, do it with excellence. Remain true to your convictions and live a life of integrity. And when people see you, they're going to have, if they, there's no guarantee, but they may have a positive impression of the God that you follow. And that conversation is going to come up. And that's not saying that they're necessarily going to follow your God. I don't think the king of Babylon ever followed the Jewish gods. Right? We can't control that. That's the Holy Spirit working in that person's life. And sometimes when we think we can control that, then oftentimes what happens is we get nervous and we're like, well, we got to do this. We got to make a difference. And so we start getting pushy and then a lot of times then people just back away. They back away because they become scared. And so what we learn from Daniel is that we remain true to our convictions. We make sure we're living our best life, meaning we're following Jesus as best as we can, while remaining connected with the world around us, that we might show the light of Christ to others. And there is a time and place for speaking our faith, but not necessarily right away. Not necessarily talking about the person's sin before they experience the love of Christ. That's number one. As we see in Jesus' own life and ministry, when he came across sinners, he didn't point out their sin. He knew that they weren't ready for that step yet. They needed to experience the love and grace and forgiveness of Christ first. The only sin he pointed out was that of the religious people, right? Jesus had the hardest time with the religious people. And that should always give us pause, especially me, because I'm a pastor. And the more religious you are, the more likely you are to become like a Pharisee. And so we have to be careful of that and realize that Jesus' harshest words were reserved for religious people, and his kindest words were reserved for sinners. And I say that like religious people aren't sinners, right? You know what I mean? Non-religious people or unchurched people. So we have to remember that. So live your life. Remain true to your convictions as a Christian. But make sure that you don't just disconnect from the world around you and judge it from our steeples. But instead, we want to make sure we are engaged in our culture and in our communities, doing the best we can, that other people may see us, and that by seeing us and our example, they may see Christ. And may the Holy Spirit then work in their lives and in our lives and in the words we speak, the things we do, so that by our life and by our words and by our example, we may share Christ with them.